All right. Well, happy birthday, everybody. So good to see you guys. We're glad that you're here today. My name is Peter. If we haven't met yet, I would love to meet you after service right out on the patio. Love to celebrate with you, high five, and make sure that you leave here with your birthday present. What an exciting day it is today. It really is. It's been a day that we've been looking forward to. Again, just like I said, not because of like numbers and all of that stuff. It's because of God's faithfulness and God's goodness to our church over the last 3 years. And it's amazing. I love watching as God moves through people just like you and how he shows up in our church and shows off in our church. And in fact, we want to know, how have you seen God? How have you seen God show up in faithfulness in your life? Or we want to know what has God done in your life in the last 3 years here at Hope City? And out on the wall, as you walk in, there's a big piece of white paper and some Post-it notes. We'd love to hear what God has done in your world or your family. Write that down as a way of reminding ourselves what God has done, as a way of sort of memorializing what God has done and how faithful he has been. So we want to publicly declare that today. So be thinking about that even this morning as I'm talking and be thinking about how has God been faithful to you? And then afterwards, we want to invite you to write that down, take that Post-it note, and stick it on the wall. But today is going to be a really special day that I can't wait to share with you some of the news about our Heart for the House year-end offering and what God is doing there. We're gonna give you an update on that. And then tonight, we're going to come back for a worship night and an after party out on the patio. We've got some fun treats in store for you there. So I hope that you'll join us. Make it a priority to be a part of that today. But there are some things that just kind of go together, right? Like birthdays and cake, right? Like birthdays and cake, it makes sense. It goes along with one another. It just works. Like food trucks and party, that kind of goes along too. And so I put a blank line in your notes there that I want you to fill out. Like, what do you think goes with one another? Like peanut butter and... Great, that's good. Yeah, peanut butter and fluffernutter. Anybody? Okay, maybe when you were 7. But, there are certain things that just kind of go together. And so I want you to be thinking about that even right now. Fill in what you think goes together. But so one of the things that we think about is that there are things that when they go together, it actually just gets better. Right? Like, how about this? Anybody agree with this? That lasagna is actually better on the second day than the first day? Right? Why? Because it's just got all that time to just sit there and marinate and it gets not goopy anymore. And now it's solidified and it's so incredibly tasty. Or what about this? Like a good soup. This right here, I could go for some of this right now, like a good seafood chowder. That would be awesome. Or a lobster bisque. And you know that after it's been sitting in that pot all day and you ever seen an old grandma just sitting there stirring the pot, working it, and you're like, what are you doing? She's like, just working the soup. Just working the soup all day long. It's just going. Or how about this? Anybody for some cookie batter? Yeah. Okay. Come on. Who would be honest enough and say that you would prefer it raw over cooked? Anybody? A few of you. Yeah, a lot of us, truthfully. When I was a little kid, my grandmother, she was the queen baker. She made cookies all the time, gave them away to every single person from the trash man to the mailman. She would bring it actually to the post office and make sure that everybody had some cookies. And if you walked into the kitchen at the right time, you could run in and you would find her. She got a mixing bowl going and you could just full on get your head in the bowl like this and just lick the outside of the bowl, maybe the spoon or the mixer if you really were lucky. I felt like an anteater just going to town and doing all that stuff. And here's the thing. We love when things get put together. We love when things get put together, mixed up, and done right, because this is really what we want our lives to look like. We all want our lives to look well put and all mixed up and then really nicely decorated and iced, and then a little bit there's some funfetti. You might not be able to see that, but there's some funfetti on top of this thing. And so this is what we want, and yet this is a lot of what we've been given. A lot of us have been given this opportunity to build a life, to create a life, and this is sort of the objective, and yet many of us we kind of go through life living a very fragmented life. We would say things like, I've got different parts of my life. And so I'll use me as an example, and you can be following along with this in your own world. Like for me, I've got the husband life. So if there's some things that we're going to put in this bowl, Tiffany and I, we've been married for 15 years, and she's the sugar in my world, like sugar mama. So we're gonna let this represent Tiffany, and we're gonna throw the We're going to throw the husband life in the bowl, right? The bowl of life. And it's been a privilege of mine to be married to her for 15 years. But I also have, I've also got another side of my life. I've also got the dad life, right? Like living my best life being the dad. And I love dad life. I mean, it has changed my life forever. Like forever. Seriously. But it's awesome. In fact, the other day, Tiffany and I were dropping off some of our friends at their house, and this is when I realized, I was like, oh, you've crossed over. Like, you are in the full-on dad life. Like, saying goodbye to them, I dropped them off in their driveway, I backed out, and then I did one of these numbers. Click, 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 click. I flashed the high beams at him like multiple times. I was like, whoa, dad move right there. Like, alert, heads up. Like, how did this even happen? And so we've got, the husband life, we've got the dad life, but then we also have the pastor life. So we're making chocolate chip cookies today. So let's throw some of these in the bowl. I've been a pastor for 18 years, and it's been my privilege to do that. And now I was a youth pastor for 11 years. I was a campus pastor, a teaching pastor, and now a lead pastor here at Hope City. And God's done some amazing things. And so all in all, we've got all the ingredients. My life is made up of these parts. Now, we also have a little bit of vanilla because my grandmother told me that you got to have the right kind of vanilla in here to make some good chocolate chip cookies. But watch this. If we were to take this bowl as is, stick it in the oven, you and I would be very disappointed with the outcome. We would look at this and be like, Peter, something wrong. Like, nobody wants to eat that raw. Like, that's not happening because it's no good. It's no good. All these parts are fragmented and separated. And see, today I want us to learn and I want us to see that a disconnected life, it leads to dis-ease. A disconnected life or a fragmented life leads to dis-ease. And sometimes you and I need to look at ourselves. We need to look at our insides and take care of ourselves. We talked about this last week, but we really need more than that. We need some incredible soul care as well. And soul care and the health of our soul begins when we look at our connection with other people. See, you and I, we do this so easily and so frequently where we will say, we want this kind of life, and yet this is what we're putting into it. Because we would say things like, well, I've got friends all over the place. I've got, for example, let's qualify them as our gym friends, right? Let's just call them our gym friends. And whether you go to the gym or not, you've got these type of friends. The type of friends where it's just a little bit easy to kind of avoid them. Maybe you woke up and you're like, oh, my hammy, like, not going there today, not doing that thing today. They're a little bit easy to dodge or make excuses why you aren't going to go and hang out and spend time with them. But we've also got our digital friends. We've got our digital friends where we can choose when we want to engage with these people, right? There's the beauty of digital friendship is that we also get to ensure that they only see what we want them to see. And so nobody can actually see the real me because I don't let you. I'm not going to let you see that. I only want you to see what I want you to see. And then we also have what I'm calling the high school friends. These are the friends that actually, they think they know you. They think that they know what they can expect from you. And so then what your job is you've got to live up to those expectations. And you've got to live out that every single day of your life whenever you're around them. See, all three of these types of connections, they just don't seem to make sense. It would be just as smart as throwing all the ingredients in a bowl and not mixing it up. Because why? All three of these connections don't get the real you. They don't get the mixed version. They don't get the version of you where everything is melding together and where it's like marinating and creating something incredibly valuable and incredibly good. A recent Pew Research Center study, it revealed something that when I read this, it took my breath away. It said this, that almost 40% of American adults, okay? So almost 40% of American adults who have lived in more than one place in their life would say that the place they're living now, they don't consider that home. Let that sink in for a second. So 40% of adults are living in a place that they don't currently call home. That home is actually somewhere else. Only 1/3 of Americans claim that they know their neighbors. Which means that it seems to me that we are more disconnected, we are more fragmented than we have ever been before. This study, it goes on to show that one of our methods of communication, our primary method of communication, actually, it doesn't feed what we need, which is proximate human connection. We need the connection with other people in nearby. In other words, we need people that are just around us, and we need to be connecting to them. My question this morning is it possible that the state of your soul, the state of my soul, is directly tied to the condition of our connections? That actually, when we move through life in a way that's similar to this, where it's all piecemeal and we've got this group and this part of me and the next part of me, and what if the state of our soul is unhealthy simply because of the way that we have structured our life? The prophet Jeremiah, 2,500 years ago, he said the following. He said that the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Who can understand it? Throughout this entire series, we've been saying this, that your heart lies to you, and it's telling you that you're better than you are, and that you're better off than you are. And I wonder, if your heart is anything like mine, are you willing, and is it willing to tell you, like, hey, listen, you don't need anybody else? Because what does our society says? Our society says, hey, you can pick yourself up by your bootstraps. You can do it on your own. You are a self-made woman. You are a self-made man. And what you're going to find out very quickly is that that's not the way that God designed you to be. See, if the heart is sick, it stands to say that our soul, if not carefully watched and carefully cared for, it can catch the same dis-ease that we all fall prey to. We're in need of some serious soul care. And as we approach this next decade, as we approach this next year, we've talked about two kinds of rhythms, some input rhythms and some output rhythms. Input rhythms were rest and renewal. The output rhythms were creating and connecting. And today we're going to wrap up this series by talking about your and my need to actually connect in a meaningful way, to connect in an unfragmented way. And so this morning I want to invite you to turn with me to Acts chapter 2, and the Bible's around you. You can turn those pages over there. It's page 744 in the Bibles around you, or follow along on the screen behind me. But here we find that Luke is writing about what God did in the early stages of the church, and in the early scene of the church, just like, we're celebrating our 3rd birthday today, and it's the early phase of even this church here. And we look and we find that Peter got up and he shared this message. He gave this message in front of all these people, and God did something incredible. 3,000 people trusted Jesus that day, and then they added themselves to the church, and the church grew in incredible ways. And look at what Luke writes here in Acts chapter 2, verse 42. He says this, that they being those people, those 3,000, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. See, I love this because what we see right here is that there's 3,000 people who decided that they were in need of some serious soul care. They were in need of living life a different way. They needed to make a change. They heard about Jesus, they heard about who he was, and immediately they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, and to being in community with one another, to sharing a meal. This was a game changer for them. These new converts didn't simply add Christianity to their already busy lives, right? They devoted their lives to the Christian experience. Something happened when they got serious about it. And right off the bat, we see that Luke is writing and he's sharing this story because he's underlining this idea that your commitment determines your connection. That as we think about this, as we think about what we want versus what we have, we need to understand that your commitment is going to determine your connection. It's going to determine what actually happens and what the outcome even might be. These people, they were dedicated to the apostles. They were dedicated to those people around them. They made a commitment, and it was fostering the connection with one another. We've all had a friend that surprised us, right? Because they didn't turn out to be such a good friend after all. Like we thought, oh man, this is my ride or die. This is that friend that's going to be with me through thick and thin. We're never going to worry about, is that person going to be there? And then all of a sudden, one day you wake up and you're like, oh, well, that's surprising. So often what happens is it's because of a lack of commitment that you don't experience what you had hoped for. You thought, man, I thought it was going to be like this, and yet it ends up being something totally different. fragmented and hurtful. And by and large, it's because of commitment. See, if you want a trustworthy circle of friends, it stands like really good advice for you to be a trustworthy person yourself. See, in the same way that authentic friends need you to be authentic. If you want to foster that kind of friendship, you need to be what you want. Brene Brown has said it this way so well. She says, authenticity is a collection of choices that we have to make every day. It's all about the choice to show up and be real, the choice to be honest, the choice to let our true selves be seen. If you want to increase your connection, increase your commitment to those that are around you, that you want to be connected to. And here's the first challenge. Every week I've been giving you a challenge, I'm trying to help you grow in these different rhythms. And this challenge I want you to see this morning is I need you to be the friend you wish you had. I want you to think about that. Like, we all have this picture in our minds of what we want it to look like, what we want our friendship to look like. But yet you show up rolling in like this. Like, be this to your friends. Be the person that you want to have. Be that kind of friend in other people's lives. See, if you want it, go ahead and be it. Be that kind of connection. In fact, on my phone, if you were to click over and look in my reminders app, I've got a reminder that shows up, it pops up every Thursday at 2 p.m. Every Thursday at 2 p.m. it says this: hey, Peter, text Jason and James and Brad and the other Brad, text those guys right now, and that's all. And then what I'm doing is I'm finding out, I'm checking in, hey guys, how are you doing? How's life? How's your church? They're all church planners, and we kind of all started church around the same time. And so every single Thursday, it reminds me to shoot a text off to these guys. Because why? I want somebody checking in on me. I want somebody that's going to show up and ask me, how are you doing? And then when I go, fine, they go, how are you really doing? Right? Like, we all want that, and yet some of us just need to step into being that. Be what you want. Here's a second challenge for you as we think about this. I'm going to invite you to calendar your commitment. Calendar your commitment, because it's easy to talk a big game, right? It's easy to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to be the very best friend. I'm going to be the best version of a friend that you've ever seen in your life. And then when it comes down to the time when your friend's like, hey, what are you doing on Wednesday? And you're like, well, actually, can't, busy. Well, what about Thursday? Busy. Friday? Busy. Saturday? Oh, sorry, man. Maybe 2 months from now? Right? Like, that doesn't work. Calendar your commitment. Like, if it's important to you, it should show up on your calendar, because what we care about gets calendared. Tiffany and I, this may sound ridiculous to some of you, but because of the value that we place on our relationship, we actually put date nights on the calendar. Like, there on my calendar this past Thursday was an invitation to a date night. And I was like, approve? Like, for sure. Like, sign me up for that. Because why? What we care about, we calendar. And so I want to encourage you. When we see this, that the early church, their connection to one another, it was grown by their commitment to one another. And this is what happened. In verse 44, it says this, that all of the believers were together and they had everything in common. They sold property, possessions to give to anyone who had need. And every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread and they in their homes, and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. Like, this is what was happening. You know what I love about this? I love this because it's so real. It's such a picture of their importance and their priority on connecting with one another. But being connected with one another caused them to do the unthinkable. They moved from being individuals to actually having commonality. Don't forget this, that these 3,000 people were unique individuals, 3,000 people that didn't necessarily know one another before this, and they came together, and guess what they did? They got together as all believers. All the believers were together and had everything in common, right? Their connection with one another caused them to get behind one another and support one another. Did you notice something? That connection increases commonality. That the connection in your life, it starts to increase the commonality in your life. Because I'm so passionate about this thing here, because you need to understand this. That it would be so easy to look at these people and say, they're absolutely crazy. They're brainwashed, they're religious fanatics, they're nutty, but don't miss this. Commonality it's not actually uniformity. They weren't the same, but they were getting behind the same thing. They were growing in what they had in common. Connection shifts that other person, that shifts, oh, that's one of the other, and it shifts people, connection shifts people to becoming a one another, to becoming a person that you actually begin to know. Why is this so important? Because it is mission critical in your life and in mine to get connected with others and to increase our commonality, because when we can see life from somebody else's point of view, we can get down in the trenches with them and we can understand what they're going through, and it begins to move us towards one another where we understand one another. We're not the same, but we begin to understand each other. See, I think that when we understand one another, it makes it a lot harder to hate one another. When we understand that, maybe we're a little bit different, but actually we have the same end goal in mind. We would love for, whatever it may be to happen. We can't hate one another as easily. When you start to understand somebody, when you start to get to know somebody, they move beyond more than just a diagnosis or some label. This person isn't any longer just, that right wing or left wing. They're no longer Republican, Democrat, or Tea Party. They are not that. They become a person with a name that has a personality to them, and you begin to say, oh, they breathe air too. They eat every day. We have a lot more in common than I thought. Skin tone doesn't begin to define us any longer. We begin to see ourselves as one another. And man, if we could have a whole lot more one anothering in this world, I think it would do wonders for what's happening around us in the world around us. See, increased connection is good for your soul because it's so much harder to let hate and just disgust live inside of you when you begin to know and connect with people. These early church members, they did something incredible too because of their common cause and their commonality and their connection. They were able to meet people's needs. The Bible says that what they did was they gathered together and they sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. And somewhere, somehow, someone was connected to a person, and it became apparent that that person had need, and they were able to take steps towards meeting their need. And do you know what I love about this? I love this because it represents and it reflects a lot of what's happening in our church here right now. It looks so very similar to what's happening in our Heart for the House year-end offering, that this campaign that we have in ongoing, that this past December, we talked about how Hope City Church received a gift, check this out, a gift for $250,000 that this last fall. And the gift was given so that we could finally, and one day we could move into a permanent home. We could move into a space that we could call our own, and we could set up in a way that serves our city and serves our families and serves our community and serves all of you. And so we announced that, we started talking about it, and that is actually just about half of what we would need in order to move into a space. So $250,000 put us at about 50% of the way there. And then, so we came and we, as you know, all month we started talking about this, and together as a church, we said, hey, would you be willing to partner with us as we prepare for what God has in store for our church? And so we talked about that, and many of you have been praying about that and giving towards that. And you heard my friend Bristol. She was on there, and she did that lemonade stand. The whole thing is incredible. And she was just a representative of what God did through Hope City Kids. See, it's not just adults. We were all in this together. Our church had commonality behind it. In fact, I want you to hear that Hope City Kids collectively, they received and gave $2,485.18, right? This is amazing what God did through kids who have very little ability to make income, right? And they were able to give this, and they wanted to give this very, very cheerfully and joyfully. And man, like as I watched this and as I watched and prayed over the month of December, it was amazing to see how God provided for our church and Currently and collectively, we have been able to see God provide through your generosity here at Hope City Church $182,571.58 towards our Heart for the House campaign, which is absolutely unbelievable. And we are just praising God for that, because we know that this, in addition to the gift that we have already received, puts us at about 86% of the way to where we need to be. Like, we are so incredibly close to where we need to be, that starting line to begin moving into a permanent facility. And we're excited about that. We're excited about that because what I love about it is that it represents people that are saying, no, we're going to get behind this. It represents a commonality, a common cause, just in the same way that the early church in the book of Acts had. That when they got together, that their hearts became united around a particular thought. And it's clear that God has had his hand on this house here at Hope City Church. To say that we're $68,000 away from closing that gap is unbelievable. God is so incredibly good. And God has been so faithful to our church. See, we know that God's heart is for Sarasota. We know that God's heart is for Sarasota. And when we as a church reflect his heart and we have it in common with our heart, we're going to see God do some amazing things, just like the early church. See, we envision a church that exists to help people take their next steps in their journey of faith. We envision a church that helps people find community and find connection with one another and serve this community. A church that creates opportunities for the next generation to rise up. And ultimately, what we're doing is we are getting ready to hand this church over to the next generation one day and say, it's your turn to run with this. See, God has brought us together. And, as by way of update, we are continually looking for that place that we're going to call home. We're continually scouring this area right here and praying that God would not only reveal it to us, but provide the remaining balance of what we need to move into a permanent home. Maybe God would have you help us close that gap. Maybe you're looking at that number and saying, you know what, we can knock that out. We can get that right to where we're going to go. And what our commitment is that everything above and beyond our operating costs is going to go directly into this, because we are so passionate about God's preparation and what God is doing in us and through us, because we can't wait to connect with other people here in our city. The first 3 years at Hope City Church have been a wild and crazy, God-sized dream and adventure. And I am absolutely confident that our best days are ahead of us. And if you want to see God move in you and through you and bring health to your soul, I want to encourage you. I want to challenge you with this. As we think about this, as we think about that connecting with one another, that one of the best ways to connect with people, it's not easy, but one of the best ways to do this is to lead with vulnerability. A challenge here is this, vulnerability is an exercise that grows your emotional and relational strength. I've made a commitment that anytime that I stand on this stage, anytime that I talk in a conversation with somebody, that I will always, always be authentic, and I will be selectively vulnerable. I will always be authentic. I'm going to always be real. I'm going to always be me, but I'm going to be selectively vulnerable. But lead with vulnerability. See, I'm not asking you to run around and pouring out your deepest, darkest secrets, but I am saying that there is power when you say, you know what, this is who I am and this is what has happened. This is my past, or this is my experience. In my men's group, we meet on Tuesday mornings. We're getting ready to kick that off again with Connect groups. And this past semester, I had the privilege of, there was about 10, 12 guys that would show up, and it was about 3 weeks into it, and one of the guys, he led off by saying, in the discussion, he said, hey, you know what, some of you may not know this about me, but I'm in recovery. And so when I read this, it made me think of this. And the power in the room was like, another guy across the table pushed back from the table, and he goes, I am too. And it was amazing to see how one person's vulnerability allowed the other person to lean in and hear from God, and to actually see how God could change his life to look something a little bit more like the way that God has designed it to look. I'm telling you that you'll be surprised to find out just how much you have in common with others when you're willing to be vulnerable with others. The next challenge I want to encourage you with, if you're like going to try stuff this week, if you want to try and grow in your connection with others, is I want to encourage you to choose connection over perfection. Because way too many of us, we wait way too long before we invite somebody to our house, before we invite somebody to coffee, before we invite somebody to get into our space, whatever space that may be. Because we'd say things like, well, when I get it all in order, when I get my house set, when I do this, when I get this all done, then I'll invite people to come over. When the remodel is finished, or when I've got whatever it needs to be. And listen, I'm telling you, I get it. I get what we want, but lead with vulnerability and choose connection. Choose that idea of connecting with people over perfection, because we need people that are going to just say, you know what, I'm going to come as I am. I'm going to host as I am, because God's going to show up when we do that, and we're going to connect with one another. The early church knew this. They would meet, they would eat, and they ate with glad and sincere hearts, it says. It didn't matter what they were eating. We don't know what they ate. It didn't matter what was going on around them. They just were focused on being with one another, being in connection with one another, kind of mixing it up and realizing that when you mix it, when you start to lose fragmentation, that you begin to see God do some incredible things. And that's exactly what Luke writes. He says in the very end, in verse 47, he says, "And the Lord added to their number daily those that were being saved." The Lord added to their number daily those that were being saved. Why? Because God, he can bless things when we are connecting with one another. You may be praying and begging for God to do something new in your life. And he's like, well, wait a second. You're not prepared for what I want you to care for. You may be begging God for a friendship, a relationship, or a marriage, and he's looking at it going like, I'm not sure that you're ready for this, right? Like, how would you care for what I give you? Would you actually be ready to care for that thing? See, but when you show up and connect, what happens is you're going to see these good rhythms, these output rhythms flow out of you, that when you've filled your life with rest and renewal, that now you have something to give to other people. And God is going to bless it and use you to bless other people, because connection leads to transformation. We say it here at Hope City all the time, that circles are better than rows. It's great that you show up on Sunday and we sit in these rows and you're looking forward. But when you get in a circle, when you get in a connect group, you begin to mix with other people. And that mixing process allows you to marinate, and your spiritual life marinates. And the pieces are no longer just kind of one thing. It's no longer vanilla or sugar or chocolate chips. It begins to form into that dough. It begins to form into that bread or whatever it is. And God can do some great things when we connect with one another, because connection leads to transformation. And connecting with others is critical in every season of your life, which is why I'm so excited about this season, this semester of connect groups, because we've got connect groups for boys, and we've got connect groups for girls, for high schoolers. We've got connect groups for every single person, every age and stage. There is a connect group for you. But when we get connected, we can see God transform you and restore you. But there's a challenge here for you first as well. In order to see that kind of transformation, you've got to forgive first. If you're going to lead the way with vulnerability, it stands to say that you might need to forgive others first. Forgive the people that have caused hurt in your life. You're not going to forget, but you can forgive. Forgive first, and then quickly apologize for the wrongs that you may have committed in the process. The second challenge is, if you're going to connect as a friend in a way that grows you and transforms you, you need to help carry the load. Because every person in this room, I don't care who you are, there are things in your life that are increasingly challenging. And we've said it from day one that you weren't meant to live life alone. That has never been God's intention for you or for me. You were never meant to be the person that's like, well, I'm going to be a lone wolf. No. The strength of the wolf is the strength of the pack. We need one another. We need connection with people. And today, we need people that are going to walk alongside of you. You need it. You want it. If we're being totally honest with ourselves, I think we're a little bit afraid to let the things all mix, to let parts of our lives mix with other parts, because I don't know what people are going to think. How's it going to turn out? But let's be real. if you're anything like me, there's something that you want fixed in you. You want health for your soul. You want care for your soul. And if you're going to see that happen, you need to connect with other people. And here at Hope City, we want to help you do that. We've said from the very beginning that we want to help people take their next steps in their journey of faith towards Jesus. And we want to help you do that. Today is Connect Group Sunday, where you can sign up for groups. There's a card in your program that you can pull that out. It's like a menu card. It looks just like this. We're going to ask that you fill out your name, your email, and the group that you're interested in. And you can just drop it off. You can tear that top part off, put it in a bucket out there. You can bring it out to a Connect Group leader. I'm going to have some friends by the door back there holding a bucket. You can drop it in that bucket. Take this back home with you so you can remind yourself where it is, what's going on, what time it is. But get in a group. Get in a group. Don't miss out on this. Don't miss out on the fact that your connection is going to determine the direction of your life. As a church, I look back over the last 3 years and I see the way that God has brought people together. I see the way that God has faithfully put his hand in the midst of our lives and in the midst of our church, and he's brought so many talented people. Think about our dream team who served this morning to make this happen. And today we celebrate 3 years, but we're celebrating so much more than that. We're celebrating more than dates and times. We're celebrating all that God has done and all that God will do in our future. Because I believe that as we connect with one another and connect with our community and with Christ, that God's going to continue to bless our church. And I want to see that for you.